Hey guys, I know it's been a few months and I've had a little bit of a hiatus, but I've had a lot of stuff with work and my personal life going on, but I'm finally here to talk about something new. So a few months ago, I wanted to buy a new camera and it was around March or April. And so I was looking around what Canon had to offer at the time and I saw that they had the Canon M50. So I did a little bit of more research on it, and at first I really wasn't interested in this camera because it didn't have an EF mount and it was an EFM mount, so I had to get an adapter and I just didn't want to do that. Well, what made me take a second take of this camera is that around the time I was looking at the Canon M50 and doing all my research on this, Viltrox came out with a speed booster for it. And if you don't know what a speed booster is, it's basically a focal reducer. It basically makes your APS-C size sensor a 1.6 and it turns that into basically the closest it can get to a full frame. So basically this speed booster turns your Canon M50 from a 1.6 crop into a 1.1 crop, which is really close to full frame, and that's amazing. Plus you get an extra stop of light. So when I found out about the speed booster, I just had to buy this because this is technically a full frame camera with the speed booster under $1,000. So I bought this in April, as you know, and at the time I think it was like probably $630 or so when I bought it on Amazon, but I think right now it's like probably a lot lower, so it might be like $550, but I'm not sure. I'll probably like let you know when I'm editing this. So, and the speed booster is only $140 and the total still amounts to like being under $1,000 with this package if you already have EF lenses. You can also buy other accessories with it. Like what I got is a small rig cage, and the small rig cage is only like $60 and you're still under $1,000 with this whole package right here. And that's incredible to me. And you can also buy 2 other batteries with this for $30 and the total is still under $1,000. That's insane. I also forgot to mention that I also bought like a third-party adapter because the Canon one's way too expensive. So I bought this one for like only $40 and the total is still under $1,000. So if this is only under $1,000 plus all these accessories, well, how does this perform? So the specs for video is you can do 1080p at up to 60 frames per second, so you have 24 and 30 frames per second. In 720p you can do 120 frames per second, and also this has 4K but only at 24 frames per second, but that's still pretty good for 4K. It's got the newest Digic 8 processor on it, so that means that the low light's going to perform a little bit better. For stills, this is a 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor, so it's basically the exact same sensor that you get in the 80D, the T7i, the 77D. So I'm going to tell you what I liked about this camera and what I didn't like about this camera. I put it to the ultimate test when I went to New York City. If you haven't seen the previous video below, the link is in the description below. So basically what I used is the M50 with the speed booster and then my Canon 24-105 lens, and this was, oh wait, hold on. Let me tell you, this combination was incredible with this lens and this camera and the speed booster. So basically this 24-105, the f4 drops down to an f2.8 because with the speed booster you get an extra stop of light. So the low light on this thing was incredible, and I barely took off the lens with this camera. It was like the perfect combination. It's basically an f2.8 24-105. That's awesome. For those that are concerned if there's a little bit distortion in a speed booster, because sometimes there can be distortion in a speed booster, I'm here to tell you right now, I really did not see any distortion at all. I didn't see any problems with video. I also didn't see any problems with photo, unless like you zoomed in like probably like 200% and you can see it a little bit. There's like a teeny bit of distortion, but like in what situation are you gonna zoom in on a photo 200% all the time? You have no problems with stills and with video on this thing. I know this isn't about the lens, but if you have this lens, I really suggest that you put this on your M50 with the speed booster. It's a life changer. Do it. So when you're traveling, this is the perfect setup for the M50 if you have this lens, because I never took this lens off, like I said, and it was the perfect focal range for like every situation when I was in New York. So one of the few things I liked about this camera is that it's pretty light and the small form factor is pretty good because you can just add a bunch of stuff to it and then it'll just feel like a regular DSLR with all the accessories on, so it won't feel heavier than what you put on your normal DSLR camera. This also has a Digic 8 processor, and this was actually the very first Canon camera to have the Digic 8 processor. Probably one of the main things that I liked about this is that you could put a speed booster on it, and that's what got me sold, because I got the full frame look and I'm using an APS-C size sensor. So in a way, the speed booster is like kind of like a cheat code in real life, so you're not paying for like a full frame sensor, but like you're pretending that you have one. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's like speed boosters are like the cheat codes of cameras. So that's how you get the full frame look, guys. Either that or just buy a full frame camera. You do you. Also, I didn't forget, the dual pixel autofocus on this camera is amazing, especially when you put the speed booster in it. It just works on par, it works perfectly fine. For example, when I was in New York City and I was doing a tracking shot of my girlfriend, and so she was walking ahead and she stopped and turned around, so I just kept walking forward, and it was tracking the back of her head, but when she turned around, it immediately recognized her face, and it was still locked on until she was basically right up to the camera. I was just so shocked on how well the dual pixel autofocus worked. When there was a third party like adapter put on this, that's incredible. And we can't forget about the famous Canon trademark tilty flippy screens. And if you're just a photographer, for stills, on one shot in high speed mode, you're gonna have 10 frames per second, and then in servo mode, you're gonna have 8 frames per second. 8 frames per second on this? That's really awesome. 8 frames per second sounds like this, guys. That's amazing! Wait, I wanna play it again. Sounds like a machine gun. That's probably not good for that. Okay, moving on from being Rainbow the photographer. The autofocus on this thing is amazing. It basically has 80% coverage throughout the whole frame of your sensor. That is so awesome for this little package. What I also like about this is that you have basically a variety of lenses to choose from. So if you're just gonna go with a normal adapter, you can use EF, EFS, and without the adapter, you can use their EFM lenses, which is really great. So you have a wide variety of the whole Canon EF mount and EFS mount and the EFM mount lenses. So there's like hundreds of them that you can choose from. And this is my very first camera where I have 4K on this, but I don't really shoot 4K as much, but I still like that I have this the option on there. And I know I shouldn't be saying this because this is a normal thing that everyone should have. It has 24 frames per second. Not trying to name any names out there, but sorry. Got a little cough there. Put 24 frames back. Yeah. And the last thing I like about this is the price. You just can't beat it. It's under $1,000 and you get all the features that I told you about. It's just fantastic. This is great, but there are a few things that I don't like about it. What I don't like, and I like at the same time weirdly, is the size. The ergonomics are too small for me. With the grip, it's just, I can barely hold it with my pinky finger, and I have to like bunch it all up, but it's an easy fix with the small rig, so I have like a better grip with it, but it still feels like it's about to fall off, and the small rig is kind of loose sometimes, so just hang on to it tighter than usual. Another thing I don't like about this is the battery life. It's just awful. It does not last you that long at all. And I remember I did continuous shooting with this one day with stills and video, and this thing didn't last me for more than 4 hours. So if you're gonna buy this, I really recommend that you get extra batteries. But you can also save your power by turning off the camera and then turning it back on. So I learned to do that in New York, and it lasted me throughout the whole day without it dying on me with one battery. So just learn how to conserve your power with this thing because it drains battery life so bad. A thing I don't like about this camera is the 4K mode. It's just not that great because this is an APS-C 1.6 crop sensor, right? So you would think that the whole sensor readout would film in 4K. But what Canon did is that instead of doing the full sensor readout, it crops in from a crop sensor camera. So instead of a 1.6 crop in 4K, you get basically a 2.5 crop. That's like more of a crop than a micro four thirds sensor. And a micro four thirds is 1.9. That's insane that Canon did that. But this isn't really made for 4K though, because the 1080p works just fine. The 1080p is great, in fact. I basically just shot in 1080p with this thing throughout my whole trip to New York. I had no problem with not using the 4K because the crop does bother me, but if you have the speed booster, that crop kind of goes away. So it goes from a 2.5 crop to like a 1.7 to 1.8 crop in the 4K mode. I totally forgot to mention this, but this thing has focus peaking and it is a lifesaver. This thing is so awesome. So instead of looking at that little screen, you have focus peaking to help you see if your subject is in focus. So that is super helpful and such a useful tool, and I'm really glad that Canon added that on here. Anyway, back to the things I don't like about it. The number one thing that I do not like about the Canon M50, and I cannot stress this enough, I absolutely do not like this. I don't understand why it's a thing, but the number one thing I don't like about this is that the sensor, when you turn off the camera, it's always exposed, and I don't know why Canon did that with the Canon M50 or their other mirrorless cameras. That's one of the main reasons why I haven't completely gone mirrorless yet, because in DSLRs, there's a mechanical shutter that raises up and it protects the sensor from all the dirt and dust that gets in, and it's fantastic. And I don't know why a lot of these mirrorless cameras just don't have a mechanical shutter to lift up and cover the sensor. I know the EOS R has it, and I think that's such an awesome feature for it, but that should just be a normal thing. The reason why is because, to make a long story short, I was doing a little test to close up the aperture on my lens, and I noticed that there was a little dot that showed up when I closed the aperture, and it turns out that there was something on the sensor, and I didn't know what it was, so I opened up the sensor and I looked online to see what I could do to get rid of it. So I tried to clean it myself. I was being as careful as possible, and I ended up damaging my sensor, and I freaked out, but luckily I was within the 30-day return policy with Amazon, so I just returned the damaged one, and they sent me back a new one. Because PSA, if you damage your sensor on your camera and you have a warranty, the warranty will not cover the sensor of the camera. They're gonna have to replace a brand new sensor, and you're gonna have to pay basically for the whole camera of the sensor. So might as well just buy a new one if you damage the sensor at all. So that's what I absolutely hate, is that the sensor is always exposed. But luckily the speed booster's here, so the speed booster just officially lives on the M50 now, and I don't really risk getting dust or dirt on it as much, and there's less of a risk of damage. So Canon, if you're listening, please do a firmware update where the mechanical shutter just closes up and it protects the sensor from like getting dirt or dust in there. And that's all I ask. So overall, is this a good camera? The answer is yes. I know I've pointed out a lot of things that I don't like, but not every camera is perfect out there. This is a fantastic camera. Yes, it has a few flaws, but every camera has a few flaws, but this is a great camera for the price range, and you're gonna get your money's worth with this thing. If you're just starting, this is a great starter camera or a B camera for your setup. So I'll leave a link in the description of where you can get this and where you can get the other accessories with this thing. I hope this has helped answer any questions that you guys had about the Canon M50, and I hope it finalizes your purchase on it, but if you just don't want the camera, there's other great options out there too. So let me know what you guys think about the Canon M50, if you own one, or if you want to own one, or if you've already owned one but you didn't like it. And yeah, I just want to know what you guys think. Alright guys, I'm gonna go now. This has been like my 15th take, so see ya.